Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss Starmer's tricky interview on the Andrew Marr show, who showed that he is capable, this guy Marr, of pinning politicians down when he can be bothered. It's a shame that he can't seem to be bothered to do it with Conservative and Brexiteer politicians. But more specifically, how Starmer will have actually done quite a bit of damage to his cause with some of his responses on Brexit. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, this was painful. Starmer's response in the interview yesterday, particularly around some aspects of Brexit, were not good. And he will surely have come away from that feeling that that was not good. He will know that it wasn't. What I hope is that he doesn't come away feeling that there was nothing that could be done about it. I hope that is the case. I would never like to feel that someone comes away from a bad situation feeling that there was nothing they could have done better. And in this video, what I'd like to discuss are the key responses, really. The reaction from others, which is not entirely truthful, but it's also not entirely unfair, and what the explanation may be. Essentially, Starmer's line is that, well, we have this Brexit deal now. It was nothing to do with us. We've got it. It's not a good deal. Thin is how Starmer refers to it, but it's better than no deal, and it's not going to magically be better in 2024. This is the one we're going to have in 2024, which is the first chance I will have to form a government. Now, the very valid points that Starmer made in the interview are twofold, and they are really important to bear in mind. One, if he is able to form a Labour government in 2024, it will be with this treaty. That's a fact. Doesn't matter how many people think if they just put enough pressure on the Conservatives into improving it, that it won't. It will. This is what Labour will have to work with in 2024. End of story. This is what they will inherit. The second point he made is that the EU will not want to reopen negotiations for an entirely new one. This is true. The EU have made this clear themselves. This isn't just like reading into it. EU officials have really made it clear they are not going to entertain the idea of negotiating anything substantial. We're not even talking about rejoining. Even just something like a customs union. They are not going to negotiate that unless it looks like there's a clear political consensus in the UK. That means cross-party agreement amongst all parties, which unfortunately initially is going to have to include the Conservative Party, which is not realistic. You know, look at the situation, and the EU officials have been really clear about that. Like, their point is it could take several years to negotiate something, and then what happens? We start to get agreement. A few years later, you have another general election. The Conservatives come back in and they just decide, no, we're cancelling all that. I mean, where's the value in the EU doing that? They won't do it. They've said they won't do it. We need to build political consensus in this country. Those points are very, very valid. And it's really important to see the rest of the responses through that lens. But unfortunately, there are a number of rejoin leaders that don't seem to be willing to admit to this. And I wish they would be conscious of this more often. That being said, the rest of his responses were a complete mess. Andrew Marr pressed him on, say, freedom of movement. Now, it is one of Keir Starmer's pledges that the UK accommodate freedom of movement for EU citizens in the UK. Now, although the reality of this position is genuinely tricky, the answer is a disaster. You know, people have said that Starmer's gone back on his pledge on this. He's abandoned his pledge on freedom of movement. He didn't. But he evaded the hell out of the question. He kept responding that we can't change the treaty. Whenever he was asked about it, and Marr asked several times, not like with a Conservative politician where he asks a question, they give whatever rubbish answer and just moves on to the next question. Reading off a lift, you could get a 10-year-old to do that. No. You know, when he's got someone that's not a Conservative or a Brexiteer, he pins them down, and he did, and it became very obvious that Starmer was evading it. It's never a good look. It's never a good look, and all he would say is, "Look, this is the treaty we've got. This is the treaty we've got." Now, it's true. It is the treaty that he would have, and it's certainly also true, like he said, that he can't promise that we'll get a mutual freedom of movement agreement with the EU in the next parliament if he becomes prime minister. You can't promise that. Like, the point he was making is, it would be untrue for me to say this. It wouldn't be honest. True, granted. But in politics, there's being honest and there's being honest in a bit too much detail. General members of the public, even interested ones, even the ones we see commentating, even like myself sometimes, aren't always considering the full details because we're not always aware of them, or they're not in the front of our minds, or we too easily dismiss them because we don't like them. That's just being human. I see no reason why Starmer couldn't have said that it's his intention to supplement the Brexit treaty with a separate bilateral freedom of movement agreement with the EU. Now, the only argument against this is that a politician in his position, someone who wishes to gain power but he can't for several years, would be absolutely mad to announce firm policies this far away from an election. A leader of the opposition must not announce any firm policy until an election campaign begins, unless it's an obvious policy that will stand the test of time. Like for example, there's been a reiteration, it's not a new policy, it's policy from Corbyn's time, but there's been a reiteration of the policy to make sure that everyone has access to the internet, for example, with kids that are struggling. We've got over 1 million kids who can't access lessons remotely during lockdown. That's one that will stand the test of time. You can certainly promise that. The reason that you generally don't be firm on policies is because things change over time. That happens at any time, but we are in one of the most volatile periods of British political history right now. Absolutely. And it's not going to suddenly end overnight. I can barely imagine what our position is going to be in 2024. Do you know what? New Year's Eve, as some of you will know, I was stupid enough to do a 2021 bingo card. God, I knew it was a stupid idea at the time. Trying to imagine what the political landscape's going to be, even Brexit-wise, in 2024. Even I'm not that stupid. Why announce a policy that might become impossible to deliver? It might become so obvious that everyone's in agreement, but it might become impossible. The problem now, however, is that he's been accused of dropping a pledge he'd already made. Now, like I said, he technically didn't, but because he evaded it, it's not unfair to suggest that he has. Because he should have re-articulated his support for that freedom of movement. Even if he tried to, justify it, or qualify it rather, by saying, but we have the treaty as we have now and we can't break international law. He should have at least reiterated his commitments to that pledge that he was happy to do a year ago when he knew full well that the government would not, they weren't going to come up with a deal that would guarantee it. He knew that. He knew he'd have no part to play at all in the negotiations. And I get that he wants to be honest and say that this treaty can't just be renegotiated if he takes office, that he doesn't want to promise something he can't deliver on. And as much as many pro-Europeans in the UK would like to believe that it can't. Like I said, influential people in the EU have made this clear. It's obvious for reasons I've already gone over. But there's no way of watching that interview clip and seeing Starmer as a man with a plan. That's the problem. And my fear is, and it doesn't mean he hasn't a plan, but my fear is that this will cause pro-EU people in the UK to leave Labour at just the time we need to encourage more to join. Because my argument for weeks now, every time people have been dissatisfied with the official Labour response, every time, people will know I've said this, has to be point out the reality of the situation. It's easy for the other party leaderships to go one way or the other. To be either fully pro-Brexit or fully pro-rejoin the EU. It's really easy for every other party political leader to do that. Labour is the only party that's genuinely split on this issue in a real serious way. Yes, most supporters, voters and even members are pro-EU. It's not that simple for Labour because the Lexiteers, which is a ridiculous term, but there we go. Yes, they're in the minority in Labour, but they are nonetheless amongst the most vocal activists in the party as well. Starmer can't afford, too much of a war in the Labour Party. One has already started. He doesn't need to add to it. And I know it looks like appeasement, and maybe it is, and I hope it isn't. But I know it can look like that. But the fact of the matter is that those Lexiteers are going nowhere. When the whip was withdrawn from Corbyn and it wasn't reinstated, there was a lot of them up for leaving Labour. And what did all their leaders say? Don't leave, don't leave. Why? Because outside of the movement, you have no say. None at all. So how do you drown them out? They're going nowhere. They're going nowhere. How do you drown them out? You have more vocally pro-European voices in Labour. Not just ones who are members and are pro-European but not shouting it from the rooftops. More of the ones who will shout it from the rooftops in the party, not fewer. You influence inside the Labour Party. Yes, it's limited. You're saying I'm already shouting from the rooftops, and yet the Labour leader is still saying this. Yes, because there's not enough of you. Get more. You could have 10 million followers hanging off your every word, shouting about how we need to get back in the EU. If you're not a Labour member, your influence inside Labour is zero. That's all there is to it. I liken the party to be like an oil tanker right now. The changing course will take time, but we need as many people pulling on the rudder as possible. The Lexiteers are a known quantity. They're pulling one way. The rejoiners are not. We're more fluid. The Lexiteers are going to stay. They're waiting for enough of us to abandon Labour that they can make their move against Starmer and reinstall a puppet again. That's what they want to do. Then we're sunk. And you might think, God, that'll serve Starmer right. He should have backed us. He should have backed us. Serves him right for making this error of judgment. The thing is, as bad as the interview was, he's not making an error of judgment. I think the interview answers were an error of judgment, but the position was not, because he's facing up to facts. The country is too divided on Brexit. Don't give me this, the majority would like us to rejoin. Yeah, they do. But as I've said before, they won't vote for that. They will in a referendum. They won't in a general election. We saw that last year. Majority of people supported staying in the EU in 2019, the end of 2019 when we had a general election. The majority of people voted for a party that committed to not leaving the EU unless we'd had another referendum with Remain as an option. Sure. But we gave the Conservatives a stonking majority because the bottom line is not enough people chose to use their vote on their Brexit position. Same again. Yes, people in isolation may say, can we go back in the EU? Yes, I would support that. Doesn't mean to say that they will abandon all the other things that they're interested in for a general election for it. We saw that in 2019. If the general country is too divided on Brexit still, Labour is definitely too divided. Doesn't matter that it's not evenly divided. If he adopts an aggressively pro-EU stance now, he will trigger a serious civil war inside Labour. And I don't know what he's hoping, because I am not privy to the discussions that Starmer will be having with his advisors. It is possible that he's hoping to continue to hold the government to account on their many cock-ups, which he knows will come thick and fast. He knows he's not going to run out of questions to ask at PMQs, and he hopes that enough moderate people see that the only route back to closer relationships with the EU is a Labour government. Because even if this position, and bear in mind, I do not expect this to be the Brexit position in 2024, because things need to develop. But even if it is, the route back to closer relationships is still with the Labour government. There's no other way. No other way. Because that will always be the bottom line. Leave Labour? Is that going to make Starmer move the party to a... Is he going to go, oh no, a load of people left. Oh, I'd better have a firmer line on rejoining the EU? No, it does the opposite. It goes, oh, a load of people calling for this have left. So the balance has now shifted towards me being more pro-Brexit. I mean, he's never going to be pro-Brexit, but you know what I mean? Why do we do the opposite of adopting a path that takes us towards rejoining? The path to taking us towards rejoining is having more people in Labour calling for us to rejoin. We're not going to do that by changing people's minds in Labour, because the two set. So we get more people in Labour already of that mind. That's what makes sense. The problem is that people don't make sense. And that's where my major criticism of Starmer actually lies, although it's at the moment I'm blaming others outside of it. No, this is actually my criticism of Starmer, because he can't argue against reality. The reality is that people don't make sense. It's not that he's gotten his policy wrong as such. His policy is to have no policy right now. That's the right policy to have. What he's got wrong is making it clear he has no policy. He needs to be able to sound like he has a policy that is ambiguous enough to adapt to changing political conditions. Not dishonest, not lying. Ambiguous. And, it's true that the EU don't want to open major negotiations on anything outside of the scope of the treaty that we now have until there is clear political consensus in the UK, which is not going to emerge for some time. But that doesn't mean he couldn't adopt a policy of trying. Most people are aware that the EU won't renegotiate. So why couldn't he have just said that it remains my policy? He could have been quite clear. Yes, it was my policy a year ago. It is still my policy, and it will still be my policy in 2024 to seek mutual agreements that will guarantee UK citizens more rights, including freedom of movement in the EU. Why couldn't he have said that? But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.